Let me can we bring my guest on? I want to introduce my guest. Is that okay? All right. How you guys doing today? Can you hear me?
I can hear
Pull
you.
your mic up. Yeah.
Hold this up.
Mic. How you doing?
I'm doing great.
Can we hear?
I'm doing just
You
fine.
doing fine? How you doing?
I'm real good.
That's good. You guys, listen, this is a great segment and it's so needed. So you know what? Maybe we'll just go into that because we only have an hour. So it's so needed. It's so needed. We're going to be talking about again gentle parenting versus authoritarian parenting. And somebody says, what is that? Also with its traumas and emotional baggage that comes along with that. It's a lot that goes along with that. Lately, within a few weeks, few past weeks, 2 weeks, I've encountered conversing with many people as it relates to their grown children, children, adult children, grown children, so, that has traumas. And I said, you know what, we need to speak to that. We need to speak to that. And I find that it doesn't discriminate because it wasn't just our culture that was sharing those things with me. So I want to talk to that. I want to speak to that. And today we have in studios with us licensed. We have I was about to call you doctor again.
Speaking prophetic.
I was like, doctor. We have a licensed clinical professional counselor in here. And this is none other than Dr. Lois and Russell Cordeaux. So, Lois, we want to delve right into this before we go into our next song. And so we could bring the music bed down. We want to delve into this. And let's talk about that. What is gentle parenting versus authoritarian parenting and its traumas along with emotional baggage?
Okay.
What is that?
So gentle parenting, that's like a buzzword. That's something that people are throwing out now. And a lot of times when those words thrown out, it's like it's a new trend, but it's really not a new trend because I have an associate's in early childhood, and we had to learn the different four parenting styles. So one of the four parenting styles was authoritative, authoritarian, permissive, and that next one, neglectful parenting. And so authoritative is really where gentle parenting comes from. And so I just want to kind of break it down a little bit, if I may.
You,
And so let me start with authoritarian. And that's the parenting that a lot of us grew up with. If you're African American in your homes with authoritarian is parent driven.
mhm.
And the parent has the final say so. And they're the ones, they set the strict rules, they give punishments, and it's really just a one-way communication. What I say goes. And a lot of times in those households, the kids couldn't ask why. They couldn't ask, well, why do we need to do that? Because it would be looked at as being very disrespectful.
Mhm.
And so that's how I was raised. And so when I went through my early childhood and they taught us the four parenting styles, because before then, I didn't know any difference. That's the way I was raised, and that's the way I thought I would raise my kids. And most people, they do raise their children the way they were raised. But once I saw the difference between the authoritarian and authoritative, which is where gentle parenting comes from, that's the parenting style where the parent really bonds with the child. And there's open communication. And in this parenting style, the child and the parent solves problems together. And the parent is more responsive to the child's emotional needs. So it's not what I say goes. It's I tell you something, and if the child wants to have a problem with it or even wants it to be explained more, the parent will explain it to them. It's not because I said so.
So is that the gentle parenting part?
That's the gentle parenting part.
Okay.
Right.
That's today's.
Today they call it gentle parenting, but it's really called authoritative. That's what it really comes from.
Okay. So authoritarian parenting
Mhm.
is how some of us came up.
Mostly all of us came up. What? Why do you have to do it? Because I said so, and that was it.
Okay. So how do you speak to, so let's go here. So the conversing that I was doing with so many people, again, not just our culture.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just our culture. So these are the traumas that it was explained to me as relates to their grown children, things that the children recall, but the
Mm-hmm.
parent doesn't recall that. So how do you speak to that when I've been with you all of your life? And so where does this episode come from?
Mm-hmm.
Where is this coming from?
And so we were talking earlier, and what I told you is that a lot of parents, well, everyone, bring into their parenting what we call emotional baggage. And emotional baggage is your history of everything that you've went through in your life, how you were raised, your childhood traumas. if you had any type of hurts, neglect, anything that you went through, you bring that into your parenting. And so let's just say if you were raised by a parent that was very strict, just what we were talking about a few minutes ago about the authoritative parenting, authoritarian parenting, that your parent was very strict. And so now you can be very strict with your child. And so that may cause emotional trauma with your child because they can't say anything. They're not allowed to express themselves. Everything is do as I say, and not even being able to bond with your child because you're not trying to bond with your child. You're not trying to find out what's going on with them. It's just, this is what I want you to do, and you're going to do it. And so that could create some type of emotional trauma with your child.
Okay, so let me put myself in that, if I will. So I've never gotten a whooping. I've never got yelled at.
You must be what we call a unicorn. Unicorns are things that rarely happen.
In all honesty, like anybody will tell you that I've never gotten a whooping. I've never been yelled at. I've never been pinched. You know, I've never had any of that. But when I have my children, it differs. Now, my kids will tell you, she abused us. You know, I'm just comically speaking, but not. So they got it. They got it. So where did that come from? Because my mom never raised her voice.
Well, you have to tell me where did that come from. Did you see someone else doing it with their children, and you thought that that would be a good way to parent my kids? Because usually children learn what they live.
So I was very cultivated. Now, I didn't get the whooping, but I'm the only girl. But my brothers did.
Ah, that's where you saw.
So I did. But my brothers got a whooping. And so I did my kids. You know, I yelled at them, but my mom has never yelled at us.
But you saw it. And so when she yelled at him, did he get in line? Did he do what she wanted him to do? So
she was a bit stronger. Well, I had both my parents. So my father was military.
Okay, so you saw that when they yelled at him, he got in line. So now when you have your kids, whatever you're doing is not working with them. So it's like, well, let me yell, see if that'll work. And then when you yell, did that work?
Well, the belt worked.
Okay.
So the belt worked. So we're talking today, you guys, about gentle parenting and authoritarian parenting. Dr. Lois Godeau, as we talk about, Lois has a book as well, you guys, and we're going to speak to that as well. So Lois, we're going to continue this conversation. Let's talk to the trauma.
So I thought I'd give a working definition for trauma because we keep putting that word out there. So what really is trauma? And I know a lot of times when people hear about the word, the first thing they think about is something real traumatic, like war, maybe someone has been raped, but trauma doesn't have to be something that big. It can be exposure to an incident or a series of incidents that are emotionally disturbing, and it can be life-threatening, and it can last because it has a negative effect. And it can affect your mental, your social, emotional, or spiritual well-being. Spiritual, but it can affect the spiritual. And what brings to mind is when I hear a lot of people talking about church hurt, that could be a trauma, something that was traumatic that happened in church that's going to affect them spiritually.
Oh, okay. Hey.
So, you know, when I think of trauma, you know, especially as related to childhood trauma, I think about incident in life. And, you know, we got whoopings. That was just the thing to do back then. But the Bible says, train up a child in the way he should go. When he's old, he will depart. And the Bible also said, spare the rod, spoil the child. You know, at least that's what we were told. So, you know, those type of things, they create trauma now. Trauma that I want to talk about on a personal level wasn't due to my mother and father, but even in school. I'm old enough to know that there was corporal punishments in school. And we got disciplined even in school. In this one particular incident, we had a teacher, her name was Miss Lights. And she told us not to play with this one kid, and I played with him anyway. You know, and she locked me in the closet. And I was in the closet crying. And when they opened the door to that closet, my tears was running, and I know my eyes was running, and all the kids pointed at me and laughed. And that was trauma for me.
Yeah.
You know, that was emotional trauma that even stayed with me until my adulthood. And I had to find outlet to release that. You know, and a lot of times we don't understand the damage that's being done to our children. and the trauma that they experience. Sometimes they don't realize it until a trigger
Yes,
happens in their life that cause memory,
yes,
and then they begin to relate to it. Like even myself, I couldn't relate to the childhood trauma that was caused to me by what Miss Lights did until something else later on in life triggered it to come back.
Mhm.
And then I began to see some of my other adult behavior came as a result of that incident. And what I mean by that, what was came out of that was feeling insecure, feeling low self-esteem, because don't forget, all the kids, not just one, but they all pointed at me and laughed. But I thank God for the grace of God because he gives us victory. And any child that has experienced trauma due to abuse,
yes,
because neglect, abandonment, all these are traumatic issues that take place in the life of kids.
yes,
So, God has a way to help us overcome traumatic things that takes place in our life.
yes. Let's go
Sometimes
to the phone. Can we go to the phone right now? Hello, Paula. The next one, no. Hello. Hello. Hi, Natanya. Natanya.
But one of the misconceptions about gentle parenting is that it doesn't have discipline, and it absolutely does have discipline. See, with the authoritarian, what happens is the parent is the one that makes all the decisions, and it's parent driven. But when you're talking about the gentle parent and you're working together with your child, let's just say, for instance, if you want your child to wear a particular clothing, and you would give them a choice, do you want to wear the blue pants or the green pants? And they still don't make a choice. You would make a choice for them, but you would explain why. And that's what was lost in the one that's with just the parent driven, is that the explanation is lost. You don't explain why you're doing what you're doing. And I think that when we say gentle parenting, I think it's because the word gentle, it comes across as you're not doing anything. But you can still have rules and punishment with gentle parenting. But the difference with authoritarian is that the punishment doesn't really teach the child. What it teaches the child is that somebody has power and it's not the child. And so that's, I think, is the difference of when we're talking about the authoritarian versus a gentle parenting. But again, with gentle parenting, you can incorporate punishment in there, but it's not looked at as punishment. It's looked at maybe more of a consequence, like maybe a natural consequence. I'll use me as an example. If I didn't study, I might have got a whooping because I didn't study. But with gentle parenting, if you don't study, let the natural consequence happen. What's going to happen if you don't study? You're going to fail the test. And then now we're going to talk about why you failed the test versus just automatically going straight to getting a whooping or a punishment.
But what about respect? Because I see a lot of the teenagers have no respect for grown-ups.
See, what you sound like you're talking about is permissive parenting. And that's when it's child driven, when the child makes the rules and they overindulge their child and they give their child what they want. See, that's a different type of parenting. Remember I said there's 4 different types of parenting? And so what you're seeing today is a lot of permissive parenting where the parents, they come to the child's rescue, they defend the child. And in the end, what we see what happens with those children is that they are very self-centered and they can't self-regulate, which means they can't handle their emotions. And so what you're talking about is mostly permissive parenting. And we see that a lot, especially these days, the overindulgence, giving the child whatever they want, making sure they have everything, and leaving out that part that I said, the discipline part.
Okay.
Mhm.
Thank you, Miss Gloria. Have a great rest of your day. All right. Oh, going back to the phones. We have another caller. Hello.
One of the things that I think we have to keep in perspective is, like Lois said, there can be discipline with regards to parenting. I think that now, especially with so much happening, and we see so many cases where the DCFS or Child Protective Services has to step in, that people are not having balance in their child rearing. You have to have balance. Again, there can be discipline, but sometimes what we see, especially in the media now, we see that discipline has gone too far. And a lot of times that's the result of an angry parent. You know, a parent stepping over the threshold of reasonable parenting because they frustrated with the child or they angry. So now what you done, as they say in the streets, you done caught a case because you done abused the child.
And that's where you see that when we're talking about emotional baggage, I'm bringing my baggage in because I'm so frustrated. I don't know how to deal with my own emotions.
So that's the baggage part. Okay.
One of the things, and I'll use my mom and dad for example, you know, my mom and dad, they didn't have these interactions in front of their kids. Now they raised 8 kids, but they didn't have these interactions in front of us. Whatever they wanted to deal with between them, it was in their room, you know. But when it came to us, there was basically solidarity. It was basically solidarity, except for the one time when my dad, he was half asleep and we asked him, could we go out? And my mother had told us we couldn't go out. Well, my dad was half asleep because he worked 2 jobs. And he said, yeah, you know. And when my mother came home, we was gone. And when she came in, she said, who told y'all to go out? And we said, Daddy. So, but, you know, but that was being comical. But on a real note, you know, parents need to learn how to communicate with each other so they can be united in front of their kids, because that's where the kids are going to see the strength of parenting.
That's good. That's good.
Thank you. All right, we're Music and Ministry, so much more than a music show. We're going to go back to some more great gospel music. Give us a call, Gentle Parenting. So you just helped me out with that gentle, because gentle, actually, when you hear gentle, it's like soft.
It
You know,
is.
it's like a soft, so there's no authority. You would think that there's no
Yeah.
authority in that piece
Yeah.
right there. And you actually helped me understand, actually, one of my daughters, how she disciplined her children. It's like, you go to timeout. I'm like, what? He just slammed the door. What do you mean you go to timeout? You stand there and right there until, you know, until you come to yourself. We don't slam doors. And I'm like, oh, you got mad.
Yeah. The first time I heard this, my daughter actually told me, she's like, Mom, I'm going to raise the kids with gentle parenting. I'm like, what's that? I had
Right.
never heard of it. And so I researched it and I'm like, wait a minute, I do know what that is. That's exactly how I raised you. But of course, it's a different name.
It's a different name.
And like I said, when I first learned about these different parenting styles was when I was in school. I was working on my associates in early childhood. And because I thought the way I was raised, well, that's all I knew. But when I realized that there was 4 different parenting styles, I decided that I wanted to raise my kids differently. You know, they still got some, you know, discipline, but the piece about communication, I wanted to talk to my children because the way I was raised, after they would tell me to do something, I had questions. I had questions, but I knew I couldn't ask why because I'd be finding myself getting up off the floor. And so when I had my children, I said, I want to be able to have a conversation with them. And sometimes it would go for hours. It would go for hours trying to explain stuff, listening to them, but I wanted them to have that free space. I didn't want them to fear me because some people parent their children out of fear. Their kids are scared to say anything because we're going to get in trouble. We're going to get whooped. And I didn't want to raise my kids like that. So are your kids grown now?
It's grown, yeah, grown, very successful.
Okay, so you can just use this with, if you have grandchildren, you can encourage them to raise their kids like that. And, you know, sometimes kids like to say, well, that's not what you did with us. But to say, you know what, when you know better, you do better. So I learned another way to do this. And so you can kind of encourage them to do this type of parenting with their children. That's what you can do now because your kids are grown.
Yeah, and did you say that your children were dealing with some trauma?
You and them? Okay, so I would, because it probably needs a little bit more exploring and processing it, I always encourage counseling only because then you can be in a judgment-free zone and you and your children can be able to talk. And like you said earlier, I don't know if you said it, someone else said, communication is the key. Because a lot of times the way kids process things, they process it at the age they are. So let's just say something happened when they were 6 years old and they carried it. And when they talk to you about it, it's like, I don't even know what you're talking about. But they're remembering something that happened way back when they were 6 and they're processing it through the lens of a 6-year-old. So when you're in counseling and you talk about it, you give them a space to express how they feel and validate their feelings. Because even though you may not agree with it, it's still valid because that's how they're feeling. And I tell people when it comes to feelings, if I stepped on your toe and you said, ouch, it would be crazy for me to say, oh, that didn't hurt. Well, it's your toes. Of course it hurt because it's your toes. So that's why we validate what someone says they're feeling. And then that's how the conversation starts. A lot of time conversation is cut off because someone will say, oh, that didn't happen. Oh, you don't feel like that. And, we've cut off conversation. So I would suggest that getting into a counseling session where you can be able to be heard and your children can be heard and you can facilitate that conversation that way.
And we'll give out that number again. We have more calls? Okay. Thank you so much for calling, caller. We hope that you are helped, and we'll give out her information again. All right, take care.
I agree that when we're talking about each child, with the gentle parenting, which again is authoritative, you are responding to each child's emotional needs individually. So even though, like you said, I think you said you had 5 children, you do respond to each one differently. But you can still do it with authoritative parenting. A lot of people, again, we said that for authoritative parenting, which is still gentle parenting, you do have discipline in there. Yeah, I think that word gentle is what's throwing everybody off. I don't tell people how to parent their children, but I know that there's other ways to get your message across. In this day of technology, I think if you gave them a choice between a whooping or taking their electronic device away, they say, give me a whooping because that's over. Don't touch my electronic device. But that electronic device would absolutely be more of a deterrent to their behavior than just a whooping. And so, like I said, I don't tell people how to parent. You find out what works best for your child, but with gentle parenting, which is the same thing as authoritative, you have to respond to your child's needs, what they need. And I'm glad that you say you talk to your children because that's what was missing at authoritarian. It was missing to talk to the children because parents felt that children should be seen, and everybody can quote that with me, and not heard. Yeah.
And you said that you have 5 children and you deal with them differently. And my mom and dad, they had 8 children. And some of us got whoopings, and it looked like some didn't get them. And it's like, now, wait a minute, what did they turn?
Something's not
But,
fair.
and I think, there would be no dispute in saying that I got the most whoopings in the house. But, in fairness to my mom, who really was more the disciplinarian than my dad was, she knew what I needed. And those whoopings, they taught me something. They kept me out of trouble. Now, my older brother, he barely got whoopings. He didn't get caught, but but he barely got whoopings. It was me and one of my other brothers. We got the most whoopings, but those whoopings served a purpose. It wasn't just to be, abrasive and abusive. It wasn't simply out of frustration. And again, a lot of what we're seeing as it relates to child abuse is frustrated parents, but there has to be this authoritative process, in getting the child, because the whole point in discipline is to turn the child from what he's doing for a positive direction.
Behavior modification. And that goes into like another topic, which we don't have time to cover.
That's what I was about to say. And so it is, this it needs much more than an hour. So we want to, Lord, give out your information again.
Okay, so my phone number is 708-270-3147. And my email address is askcoachlois@gmail.com. And so yeah, I do have a book, but actually a lot of the things that I talk about, because I have a YouTube channel that's called Ask Lois, the Relatable Therapist. And I talk a lot about things that will help parents. It's really a parent support YouTube channel. And I give little snippets. I know Jeanette and I was talking, and she's like, yeah, you started talking and you didn't finish. And I said, well, that's because I do a coaching program. I have a coaching program where I help parents that want help with their children. So I just give little snippets so you can know I know what I'm talking about. And so maybe it's a topic that you really want to explore more, and then you could just give me a call or email me and we can talk about it. So my YouTube channel is Ask Lois, the Relatable Therapist. And also on that channel, because that channel is for bio parents, step parents, and co-parents. And so I wrote a book. It's called Take a Deep Breath, Relax, because you got this. And it's a book for blended families, and it has insights to motivate and inspire you on your journey in your blended family, because I'm in a blended family. My husband and I, we have a blended family of 5 children, and that was a journey. We've been married 27 years. And so the book, it actually gives little snippets into how to deal with certain aspects of a blended family. And that's on Amazon. You can get that on Amazon. And it's really good because the book, it just doesn't talk about snippets, but it's like a threefold. It's to help address the challenges that step parents face. It's also to encourage and reflect thought-provoking questions. So I have questions in there to make you think about it. And then lastly, I have scripture reference to show that, first of all, God is with you in this blended family process. And then it's also going to bring you comfort and hope from the word of God. So it's like a 3-in-1 book. So I encourage you to get it. It's on Amazon. It's called Take a Deep Breath, Relax, because you got this.
My ex-husband and I were parenting. I was more so of the disciplinary. And he would always say, go ask your mom. Go ask your mom. And so they would always wait till I'm gone to go. A situation like yours, like, well, Daddy said we can go outside. Well, Daddy said we can do that. And I want to segue into this because I was, just listening, I was borderline abusive. So that's borderline abusive. And I've never been abused, and I've never been abused in that manner. And so this is good. And we're going to bring you back, Lois, because this speaks to so many avenues in our lives as adults. We're talking about adult children, but what about us? So I love what you've brought to the table. Street sermons, and we're gonna close out. We'll close out. You guys got anything to say before we leave?
The only thing I have to say that, when we talk about parenting, I don't want any parent to feel guilty about how they parent, because hindsight is 20/20. And this is why we have these conversations, so we can learn how to do better. And if your children are grown, you can still use it with the next generation. I'm not saying I did everything right with my kids, because you ask them, they probably got some stories too. But I'm saying that if you want to do better, the scripture says, my people perish for lack of knowledge. And if we want to do better, we have to find out, so how can I do better? What do I need to do? And I know we really didn't get into emotional baggage, and that's a lot what we bring into our parenting. We bring a history of all the things that we really have been through, and then we bring it to when we start parenting. And so when we're frustrated and when we're angry, a lot of times that's because we really need to deal with that emotional baggage. And that's one of the things I do is in my coaching program, I deal with that emotional baggage. So I'm just saying, parents, that if you want to do better, then just figure out, what can you do? If you need to reach out, if you need to go to counseling, do that so you can be that awesome parent.
We have a believers community that meets on a Sunday morning, and we share the word of God. We share prayer, and if you want to join us, you can reach out at that same number that you gave below us. 708-270-3147. Andrea says to tell you hello.
So I said hi.
She hears you.
Hi.
All right, you guys, we got to make room for our brother Keno, and we'll see you guys on next Friday if the Lord says the same. Have a great, safe weekend. God bless.